PR Connections Radio presents. This show is brought to you by Paid Per Letter. Write letters and make a difference. paidperletter.com/Uncle Dan.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Voices of Humanity show. My name is Guy Dawson, and I am your co-host. And the Voices of Humanity show was launched back in 2020 through a series of interviews that were impactful for that time period. As we all know, we were in the middle of COVID. There was a great deal of social upheaval. And part of the way that we launched the network, PR Connections Radio, was through interviews with families impacted by interactions that their family members had with police. I did, as I mentioned before, a series of interviews. One of the people that I interviewed during that time was Lori Benson. Hello, Lori.
Hi, Guy.
And Lori shared her story of how her son's interaction with the police had definitely impacted her family and her life. And she is now going to be the co-host of the Community Activism Edition of Voices of Humanity. She'll be helping me out with these shows, as we are going to circle all the way back and share more stories of people who need to have their voices heard. One of the people who needed to have her voice heard during that time was Jeannie Yera. She is the mother of Jorge Gomez. He is a young man who lost his life during interaction with the police here in Las Vegas back in 2020. Welcome to the show, Jeannie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Lori, do you have a question that you'd like to ask Jeannie?
First off, I just wanted to say that I admire her very much for still fighting for her son's rights and the activism she's doing. I give you a lot of credit, and I appreciate you and people like you very much so. But of course, I have lots of questions about your son's case and why. A lot of whys about why. Why did they not have body cams? Just a lot of questions. And it's just a sad event that happened, and we were advocating for people's rights at that time, and that was unnecessary, and hopefully nothing like that ever happens again, but yeah.
Right. Maybe you could share a bit with the audience, Jeannie, about your story.
Sure. So my son, Jorge Antonio Gomez, was out protesting. So George Floyd was murdered, and he had just come back from Oregon during COVID. He was actually going to school and working 2 jobs. And once COVID hit, he decided to go right out what he thought was just a couple of weeks with his dad in Vegas, because it's only like a 10-hour drive. So he went to Vegas, and then George Floyd was murdered, and Breonna Taylor. And so everybody, the whole nation, was in an upheaval and was out protesting. So my son was out in Las Vegas with thousands of others protesting against police brutality, against police murder, violence. And he was murdered. He was actually leaving the protest, and his dad had told him, because he was using his dad's vehicle, his dad had told him just to park his car, his truck in a safe spot. So my son decided to park it catty corner to the Floyd Federal Building in Las Vegas off the Strip. And so the protest was at an end. It was, 11:15 or so. And he was walking back to his vehicle. In the process of that, he was, had done a dispersal order where he was, which was blocks away from where the car was. He was walking back, and he noticed across the street that they were arresting people for jaywalking. Now, mind you, they were herding people in a certain direction, and the streets were closed and stuff. So he was following the rules and going in the direction they told him to go. and he was trying to get over to the crosswalk. There's a crosswalk right in front of the federal building. He was trying to get to the crosswalk because he had just texted his dad saying, "Hey, Dad, some streets are closed, but I'm on my way." So as he's heading to the crosswalk, he sees that there's about 8 police officers on the top of the steps of the federal building, and he starts walking very slow. He's almost walking like a heel to toe, and he knows he's legally open carrying. He's not a stupid kid. So he actually interlocks his hands in front of him so that they see his hands. There's nothing in his hands. He's walking slowly, no funny movements, and interlocks his hands in front of him. As that's happening, one of the officers, John Squeo, decides that he's not walking fast enough and shoots him with 5 less than lethal rounds. Now, when we did the second autopsy, we actually saw that he was actually shot in the back of his torso and the back of his knees with the less than lethal rounds. So he was already facing the other direction to cross over the street. When he was hit, he doesn't know what's happening. He runs back towards the direction he came from. In that process, he trips and falls, and his backpack falls. So he grabs his backpack, and then he continues on running. There are about 4 or 5 different patrol vehicles across the street that were stopped because an officer had been shot in by the Circus, which is about 2 miles away. And they were getting on their gear. When they see my son running, they saw the smoke from the less than lethal rounds. They saw my son running, and they shoot him 19 times. When we had the autopsy done, the shots were to his back and his left torso. Now, some of you have seen the video and ask, why are these the only videos? Why don't we have body cams? Nevada passed a law many, many moons ago stating that any law enforcement officer that's interacting with the public is required to have a body cam. There were over 20 officers across the street. There were 8 officers on top of the steps, yet none of those body cams ever came out. They said they don't have them. They weren't required to have them. They came up with excuses. We were able to get a video from the D, which is about 2 blocks away, and it's very grainy, but you could see him running, and he was running away from the officers. He wasn't looking at the officers. He had one mission, which was just to get out of there. And that's when he was killed. So the officers, at this point in time, the officers are back from administrative leave. DA Wolfson has refused to charge the officers, as he always does. He's never charged an officer in his existence. No. He's never held an officer accountable for shooting any of our community members. But we do have a civil case that we're pursuing, and that's where we are right now.
And the circumstances, of course, like you mentioned, Jeannie, and when we talked, it was when I actually interviewed you back in 2020, I don't think it was more than maybe 2 weeks after this had actually happened. And I just always admired your courage to even be able to do something like that 2 weeks after your son had passed away. And the lack of accountability of the police. Can you talk about that? And what has it been like since, with making these police officers show some type of accountability for the loss of your son's life?
Well, I mean, it's really hard to show accountability when the leadership isn't taking accountability. This is how they're trained. I mean, these officers were sniper training officers, the one that shot him across the street. They actually were officers that trained other officers on how to write reports during police shootings. So it's really hard to take accountability when leadership doesn't take accountability. You have Sheriff Lombardo that was sheriff that's now governor. You have the DA that was reelected. So you don't have accountability from leadership. You don't have accountability from officers. And this isn't just happening in Las Vegas. I mean, I've spoken to impacted families nationwide, and this is something that needs to be changed federally so that these officers are held responsible. I was actually on the call and on the bill for the George Floyd to end qualified immunity federally. And the Senate never passed it. Senate never signed it. It never got to Biden's desk. So unless we do massive changes at a federal level, this will continue to happen because they're granted qualified immunity. So the officers know they'll get away with it. They know they're not going to be, there's no repercussions for them. They'll continue doing what they do.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Any thoughts on that, Lori?
Yeah, there's just so much of that. Nobody being accountable for their actions, you know, at any state level. When it comes to like my son has been in county jail, was in county jail for 10 years and treated very poorly. He still wears a colostomy bag to this day from Metro shooting him in the stomach from 3 times from 10 feet away. He did hold up a knife, they said, but they refused to reverse the colostomy bag because they said it's an elective surgery. I mean, just, you know, they just want to, they don't want to face anything that they have done, or, you know what I mean? The police union, I've contacted everybody from county commissioners to the governor to the police union to so many people that you would think would want to be aware of this and want to change some of this that's going on. And they just string me along usually. And I've not been able to make any changes for him at all. I'm still at a loss. I still don't know what to do. And, you know, I'm starting to feel like nobody really cares about his situation. And, you know, what's happened to him has happened. And I'd like to just make people aware and change for the future for other people, you know, that is going through the same kind of issues.
Yeah, and for you, Jeannie, of course, you were involved in a very high-profile case. You've got this ongoing litigation that you're going through about this. I would imagine there's 2 aspects of this. Of course, the terrible loss of your son, and then the continuing aspect of the litigation. And how, for you, does it work managing, of course, that loss and continuing to have to sort of address that loss as part of this ongoing litigation? How do you manage that?
You know, I focus all my energy on helping impacted families. That's the only way I can survive it. My son wasn't out there protesting for himself. You know, my son was out there protesting for other people, for our brothers and sisters that were out there. So for me, I just feel like I'm trying to pick up where he left off, and try to continue to support the community while trying to get laws changed, while fighting for impacted families and supporting them through the process. That's the
so
only thing that's been
courageous
able
of you.
to keep me sane.
Yeah, and that's so courageous of you. I appreciate you.
When we were off air, Jeannie, one of the things that we talked about is that this case continues to be a high profile case. And I guess a lot of it is tied to just how big it was at that time and how you have these ongoing reminders of what happened to your son. Maybe you could share with the audience about how you're keeping this case front of mind so that the impact of it is still being felt in the community.
Sorry, I didn't get the last part of that.
Oh, so what I was saying was the way that you are, because you're having these regular meetings and there are events that are tied to the death of Jorge, how you're able to keep this as a front of mind issue so that it serves as an example. That was roughly what I had talked about. How are you, these events that you're doing are keeping this as a front of mind event for people? Can you hear me, Jeannie?
Yeah, sorry. I think I just lost connection there again for a second. So I
okay.
heard about the front of mind part of it. So are we talking about the events that we're having?
Yes.
Yes.
So I mean, the most that we can help and support and uplift the community through our events, through our education. We have worked with various organizations in Las Vegas that support our family, support the community, and we're in front of mind by keeping his name in the media, by keeping his name in the organizations, by continuing to be out there. Like, I live in Florida, but I'm constantly flying back and forth to Vegas. We have the JAGS gun education program, just happens every month in Vegas. So we're just keeping, not just Jorge Antonio, because again, I mentioned that Jorge Antonio wasn't out there fighting for himself. So I always invite different impacted families to come and speak at our events to know that they're not alone. It's Jorge Antonio wasn't the only one murdered in Las Vegas. He was just one of many. So we try and bring the community together, bring impacted families together to continue this fight, supporting each other in the process.
Right. So tell us more about the impacted families and the work that you're doing in that way.
So as far as impacted families go, my son actually met an impacted mother the day that the night he was killed. He was a dispersal order. Well, right before the dispersal order had been given, he had seen a Carol Luke, and she was actually crying. She had her son's ashes in a sign, and she was crying. And my son walked over to her and asked her if she was okay. And Carol proceeded to tell my son about her son, about Thomas McHenry, and how he had been shot at that point 5 years ago by Metro as he was on his knees with his hands up. And my son gave her a hug and whispered in her ear, "Stay strong and tell your son's story." And 20 minutes later, my son became another victim of police murder. And so she's one that I have a very, very close relationship with, because it just so happens that a lot of birthdays, a lot of anniversaries happen around the same time. Her daughter, LJ, was actually very much involved in the beginning as well. We have a lot of different impacted families. We have Latia, that son was killed, Isaiah Williams. We have, and there's just so many, that I just don't want to say one, but they come out to our events. We have people fly in from other states. This last event we had Elaine Simmons fly in. Her foster child, Jessie Saray, was murdered in Washington State, and she flew in. So we have a lot of different impacted families, and we stay in contact. I talk to impacted families every single day. It's not one day that has passed that I haven't spoken to an impacted family, whether it's been 20 years, it's been 5 years, or it just happened. I actually just had a neighbor of mine that her nephew was just killed a couple of months back by police here in Orlando. So I'm constantly just trying to uplift, help, and guide families, because what happens is that when your son is murdered, they try and be your best friend, and they try to make things out seem like somehow they're not culpable, but they want to be there for you. And in that process, you don't do things that you should do, like get an attorney, like ask for a second autopsy, like not speak to police.
Right.
So I try and guide them in a way that will best serve their family to get justice and to fight the system that's stacked up against us.
And I know, Lori, that a lot of what we did back in 2020 revolved around a group of impacted families, that it created a support group that enabled you all to have people who could empathize with your situations, because you'd all had these family members that had these challenging situations with law enforcement on an ongoing basis. And I guess this question is for both of you. How helpful is that just to have that support group around you of people who understand.
It's very important.
As for myself, I don't think I'd be here. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's all right. I was just going to say it's very important to know that other people can relate to what you're going through. And, it's a form of therapy, just speaking with people and being able to express about what's happened to your loved one, because a lot of people don't want to hear it. It's like old news, or it's depressing or negative, and a lot of people are, don't want to hear about it. And the more you talk about it, the more it does help to heal, help to heal you.
How about you, Jeannie?
Yeah, for myself, I don't think I'd be standing without the support of the community, without the support of impacted families. I've come to realize that my family are impacted families. The other family that I have, they don't understand. They don't want to talk about it. Just like Lori said, they're thinking that it's time, so you should be over it. And there is no time limit. You'll never get over your kid.
Right.
And only an impacted family member understands that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really powerful when I was doing these interviews back then, when there were certain people who had lost family members 10 years before 2020. I mean, there were several of the families where the family member had been dead for a long time. And as I did these interviews with them, you could just still feel, right? It could have been a decade ago. If I remember correctly, there was someone, it may have been maybe even 13 years from the time that we did the interview when they actually had lost that family member. And again, you just could feel that the pain's there. The pain is real, and that it is something that you need help with it, right? I mean, this is one of the reasons why this show exists. Again, born out of so how this show really started was, I'll just share this really quickly, is that they were having the protests, as Jeannie had talked about, down on Fremont Street during George Floyd, the killing of George Floyd. I had gone down there that day during the protests, and I didn't actively engage in the protests. I'm a journalist, and so I was just really curious. It was, all over the news, all over social media, what was happening. And I went down there and I watched the protests. And I said, you know what? My best use might not be protesting. My best use might be creating a platform as a journalist that will allow people to be able to share their voices of humanity. It came to me right there. And here we are. Here's 4 years later. We are still continuing to do this, is to give people a platform to be able to connect with others and share their stories. And again, I think just both of you, having interviewed you both back in 2020, and here we are 4 years later, being able to support your process, it's just so important. So important.
Yes, it is. And for others, a lot of people don't get to express, you hear about it on the news, maybe something happening, and then you don't hear about it anymore. And there's so many people, I'm sure, that would like to get on here and talk about their situations that they've had, and they're still going on. I'm sure.
Jeannie, in terms of Jorge's case, what is the ultimate result that you are seeking through this litigation? Did you hear me, Jeannie? Can you hear me, Jeannie? It looks like Jeannie might be having some trouble. Looks like she's having a little bit of internet trouble.
Yeah.
I'm back.
Okay.
Say that once again.
Oh, okay, Jeannie.
There you are.
There you are. Can you hear us now?
I'm good.
Okay. So the question that I had asked you during was, with you having ongoing litigation in Jorge's case, what is the ultimate result that you are seeking through that litigation?
So, I mean, as a mom, I mean, the only thing that would ever give me peace is having my kid back. And obviously that's not going to happen. So as far as me goes, what we want to do is we want to make changes to laws. We want to set case precedents so that this does not continuously happen. That's the only thing that we can do at this point in time. So we want to proceed to continue to make the changes necessary to protect other families, other community members from having to go through what Lori's gone through, what I've gone through, what so many impacted families have gone through.
Do you suggest starting at the state level at through the legislature?
So it's really tough right now in Nevada because Sheriff Lombardo is not Governor Lombardo. So he's going to veto anything we put on his desk right now. We have 2 bills that we've been trying to push through, and they won't make it far. The sheriff will protect his own, or the governor now will protect his own. So it's really hard to do anything right now in Nevada at a state level. At a federal level, we have to be there in masses for them to hear us. You know, I have spoken to senators, I've spoken to congressmen, I've spoken to assemblymen, and it all kind of, it's all a party thing now. Republicans, the Democrats, everything that's happening right now with everything in the political field, it's really hard to get anything accomplished. But it doesn't mean we're going to stop. I mean, we have, like right now in Cleveland, Ohio, we'll be going there next month. We'll have another march in Washington, D.C. This is something that we continuously do. So is it going to be immediate? No, but we have to not give up.
Right, exactly.
Jeannie, I know you had spoken about how you have allies who are helping you to work through this with the other people who've been impacted by these types of situations. Who are some of the other allies that you have in terms of the litigation? Who are you aligning yourself with to help you to receive the justice that you're seeking?
Well, as far as specifically to my son's case,
yes,
we have attorneys. We have a panel of attorneys. We have a civil rights attorney. We have a senator. We have another law firm that specializes in focus group and jury selection. So as far as my son's case, we have attorneys that are leading that charge, so that we can, pursue justice for him. As far as the community, we align ourselves with various different community members in Las Vegas. One of the main ones, of course, is More Than a Hashtag. They're very strong in getting community involvement to protect community members, to uplift impacted families locally. And national levels, I have Families United for Justice. I have Impacted Families. I have, the moms. There's just Black Lives Matter grassroots. There's just so many different organizations that support us, and that in turn we support them to try and make changes necessary on a United States level.
Right. Yeah, and those allies are so important on different levels. Lori, do you have any other thing you'd specifically like to ask Jeannie related to her case, or
Yeah, I was just curious. Do you have local attorneys here? Did you?
We do. So the night my son was killed, there was actually a legal observer that was out there that night. That when my son was killed, we were able to get in contact with, and that law firm is not a civil rights attorney. They actually work with immigration law. But he told me specifically, listen, I feel like, I was there that night, and, I really want to help your family. And so he said, let's get a panel together of attorneys that will actually help support us in the civil rights part of it, in the focus groups and the jury trial selection, because they understand our families fight to take this all the way. So they're looking for the long term. Obviously, it's been 4 years and we're still in the fight as far as the civil case and everything else. So we have a local attorney, and we also have a civil rights attorney. So we have Dale Gallipo is our civil rights attorney. He's out of California. We have Claggett and Skies, which is local to Las Vegas that specialize in focus groups. And we have now, well, Rudy Gonzalez has been with us as well from day one. And he is one of the lawyers at the firm that he is the main lawyer at the law firm in Las Vegas. And Edgar Flores was an assemblyman at the time, and he's now a senator. He is no longer really working the case anymore because he is so trying to fight over there in Carson City that he is never available. So he is still, but he's one that I'll text right now and he'll respond to me within 5 minutes. So our attorneys are almost like extended family to us now. So yeah.
It's good to know that you have that support out there. Really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because I guess of how it happened, and because my son was fighting for others, I'm very glad to see that the community is actually supporting and fighting for him. Another person that was out there was probably about a block or two away from where my son was killed was Athar. He's actually the director now of ACLU, and he was at the public fact-finding review. He's been with us, as well, because the police officers were they were taking everybody down that night. They were arresting everybody. And he was standing at a corner waiting with his frat boys, frat brothers, I should say, for an Uber. And they took him down to the ground. It was crazy. That night was crazy. It was like a military style, like we were foreigners to them, and they were just, it was crazy.
Right. Yeah, I was there the night or that day for the fact finding for your son.
I remember.
And I spoke up, and there was a lot of people there that I was, I felt, unfortunately, that wasn't the answer that we wanted to hear. But there was so many people there supporting you,
Oh yeah, you could hear them inside the courtrooms.
Yeah, I remember.
We were in the courtroom. They were out there yelling and chanting, and they had to stop it for a little bit because they were protesting so loud outside you couldn't hear inside.
Right, I remember. Yeah, so there's the community knows. Everybody knows right from wrong, and everybody thinks Metro can do what they want. But there's got to be some sort of solution for this that's been going on, and I know people that would never speak up about their harassments and their physical abuse that they have, went through, in the past, past 40 years, people have been experiencing stuff and have never had a platform like this to get on and speak about their issues. So I appreciate you coming on and talking to us. So important.
Definitely. I'm happy to hear. And just so that you guys know where the case is right now. So we had an evidentiary hearing, and the judge said we have enough evidence to push forward. Mm-hmm. Then the attorneys for the 5 officers filed something called a motion for summary judgment. A motion for summary judgment is what they file to protect their officers with qualified immunity. So the judge looked at all the information, and the officers were denied qualified immunity. What does that mean? What is qualified immunity? So qualified immunity has been around since the 1800s. It's really just, it protects law enforcement. It protects state officials from being sued. If you can show in your case a constitutional or a federal law violation, a state law violation, that is how you win qualified immunity. Or I should say, that is how they lose qualified immunity. Because it's not that we win qualified immunity, it's that they lose qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is not a law. You know, a lot of people think, oh, qualified immunity is a law. Qualified immunity, they're protecting the qualified immunity, it's a law. It's not. It was actually introduced in 1967, and it was upheld. It was a Pearson and Ray, and Pearson versus Ray, and it was upheld by the Supreme Court. That set a precedent that creates the protection for law enforcement officers. So it's not a law, it's a precedent, it's a case precedent set by the Supreme Court. So when I tell you that we want to take this all the way to trial because we need to set precedent in case law, that's what I mean. Because if we win, that's why I say, you know, that's why everyone says, if I win, everybody wins. Because if I win, if we win the case, it sets precedence in Gomez versus LVMPD, and it can be referred back to in other lawsuits.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's why we're trying so hard. So they denied the officers qualified immunity. They denied their summary judgment. And there was 5 denials. It was 5 officers. They denied First Amendment, which was free speech rights and peaceful protest, unlawful search and seizure, excessive force, battery, and negligence with wrongful death. So they denied qualified immunity on the main huge cases, the main huge parts of that law, of the lawsuit we have. So it was denied back in October of 2023. So the judge has now mandated we go to mediation. Now, mediation is always, they always mandate that because they're trying to resolve issues. They're trying to resolve the case before it goes to trial. And if anyone has heard us speak, or our family speak, is that we are not taking a deal. We don't want money. We don't want blood money. We're not signing an NDA. We don't, there's nothing they can offer us that will have us settle this case. Nothing. Unless they bring my kid back, they arrest, charge, fire the 5 officers. They reopen all of impacted families' cases. They get rid of this DA. They get rid of this governor. It's not going to happen. So because it's not going to happen, we know that mediation is not going to work for us. Not to say that it might not work for other families. It just does not work for us. So once we go to mediation and that gets resolved, then the judge will set a trial date. So that's what we're waiting for. So it's been 4 years, and God knows how many more years we have in front of us, but we're going to continue the fight.
Nice. Very nice. That's awesome. I wish you guys the best.
Thank you.
I do believe that, you know, that gives us all hope, you know, for change.
Exactly.
For sure. Yeah.
And that's what we need to happen. We need change to happen so this stops happening to our kids, to our parents, to our brothers, to our sisters. We need this to stop. Right. And we have to take a stand. We have to take a stand.
Yeah. Yeah. And strength in numbers, like you said. Strength in numbers. You know, we need people to get more involved. You know, because if it's not happening to you and it hasn't hit home yet, in the future it can, and it can happen to people personally. You know,
it doesn't have to
until it hits home. You know, but as a community, as people, as a whole, we all need to support each other's, and you know, united we stand.
Yeah, it doesn't have to happen to you for it to matter to you. That's what they say, right?
Right.
It has to matter to you today, so it doesn't happen to you tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah, because it very well could happen.
I mean,
yeah, it's very, very impactful. So much that you covered today, Jeannie. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity to reconnect with you and to have both of you together in the same podcast is even more impactful. That having the two of you sharing your voices of humanity, real stories. These things don't go away when the news cycle ends. And that's part of what this platform is all about. And I wish you nothing but continued success, Jeannie, as you pursue justice for your son.
And others.
And others. Yes, because this is a movement. This is something that's bigger than just your son. And I like the way that you keep circling back and making sure that you emphasize the fact that this is a movement, that this isn't just about your individual loss that you took, which is huge, but that you're doing this for the futures of other voices of humanity.
Amen.
Yeah.
Anything else, Lori?
That's it. Thank you, Jeannie. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys having me on.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for tuning into the Voices of Humanity podcast. And we greatly appreciate your support of our network, prconnectionsradio.com. Continue to watch our wonderful shows and stay tuned for the next edition of Voices of Humanity. See you soon.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.